Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. I finally finished the Autumn Runner and I want to show you what I've done on it. Now before we get too much further, I want to step back in time and talk about what I wish I had done before I ever did any stitching on this project, because when I look at it now, it's a glaring issue. So when you look at the runner, it's got this enormous orange patch over on the left. And it's bigger than all the other pieces, and I really wish I had taken and put a piece of maybe something like this lining fabric that's over here in the middle and the right, and put a triangle of that material here. I think it would have helped balance the whole project, and it would have looked a lot better in the long run. It's a little late for that now, since I had already stitched all of these seams, and I don't really want to rip it out and stitch it again to make that happen, and it would look funny, I think, if it's just sticking up by itself. So one of the other things that I looked at was that this seam here left this whole side undone, and it just needed something else. So I did bead a seam with some small ribbon stitch leaves and some, I think they're number 6 pony beads, I'm not positive, either 8 or 6. And that helped fill in that seemingly empty space. I decided to just leave this whole thing as it was because I just couldn't come up with something else for it. So I ended up deciding to just do the smooth edging on it rather than putting anything on. I did want to put some lace on, and this one in particular I really liked because it matches the color. Unfortunately, I only had enough to go halfway around it, but it would have looked really nice. And the other one I considered was this one, and I also was pretty happy with that. It was similar enough tones to this piece that it would have worked fairly well, but again, I only had enough to go really up one side. You'd think for all the lace I have that I could have found something that would have worked a little bit better, but it was not meant to be. I just did that where I put the backing on. I didn't add any interlining, and I just stitched around it right sides together and then left a gap and then turned that and whip stitched the corners. Before I did that, I did stitch on this label. I really feel it's important to sign our work. We do all this work, and a lot of times I think we spend so many hours working on a project, often more than a painter would put into a painting, that they sign their name to. Why shouldn't we get credit for signing our work as well? I like to put the date I finished a project and my name, and if I've given it a title, that's what I put on. So I just used a micron pen and wrote my simple titles, what I've been calling it all along, my herringbone autumn runner, and then who it was embroidered by. And I didn't say created by because I did not do the piecing. I only did the embroidery on this. I stitched this on using a herringbone stitch to a piece of silk in similar autumn tones to the main piece. And then I found this piece of batik that was big enough. One of the things I find with crazy quilting is that my pieces of fabric are often only fat quarters, and they're often not enough to back a bigger piece like this. So I really had to hunt for a piece of fabric that went with it well enough, that I was happy with, that was large enough to create the back without having to do all sorts of interesting piecing with different types of fabric. So I was glad that I found this particular one. And then the edges on both of these pieces were just folded under about 1/4 of an inch before I stitched them down, and I stitched it down to the center of the backing as well. There's no interlining in this at all. It's just a runner. It's not meant to be a hot pad, and so I think that's going to be plenty with it. So I thought I'd take you quickly through the seams that I did on this as well. So we'll start over here. I started off using this piece of lovely metallic braid, and then it's got an overlapping herringbone in what looks to be a strand of number 12 pearl cotton, and then a couple beads. I liked this seam, so let's turn that one around. This seam is something completely different than anything I've done before. So it's got the herringbone, but then it's topped to make it look like a heart, and I enjoyed that one in there. I liked this seam. I think it's because of the color. It's green. It's a herringbone, and it's just got some decorative cross hatching on it, and then some green beads that coordinated well with it. And then this one was a nice seam. This is one I may use again. It's just a simple herringbone. I think worked in a number 8 pearl cotton. You'll notice that I got a couple of these off a little bit. This one's a little wide, but because all of the herringbone stitches end on each side at the same spot, it's not real noticeable until you actually go in and look right at that one. It's got a couple of beads here at the bottom, and then these are just pistol stitches using a variegated pearl cotton. And then this one was a simple herringbone here, also with pearl cotton. I added those little, I think they're some kind of stone bead, and then some rayon thread for some lazy daisies. So pretty simple seam on that one. These two middle seams here on this long seam, these are all really simple stitches to do. They're not complicated. So let's start with the one on the right. It's a herringbone. It's got the cross hatching on that, but also on where it crosses. But these are detached herringbones. So instead of being continuous, they're separated. So each one is worked as a unit. And so I had not done those before, so this was a first for me. So I added the cross hatching in the green, and then added these floral beads and just a couple of little straight stitches at the top. I think they're fly stitches now that I look at it. This one is just a plain herringbone. It's got a cross hatch across the bottom of it, and then I just did some simple little, they actually might be colonial stitch or French knot flowers that I put a bead in the center of. This one, covered in cat hair, is another detached herringbone. It's really similar. In fact, I'll bring it down so you can see them both. It's really similar to this one, except the crosses are much larger and the hatches are much larger, so they actually come together here in the center. And it's got a couple of beads and again a couple of fly stitches, so almost the same seam as this one, but it's got a completely different appearance because of the extra length on the stitches. This one is one of my favorite seams on the whole project, and it's got the herringbone done in a pearl cotton. It's got some cross hatching also done, I believe, in a pearl cotton. But then it's got a cretonne stitch stitched in a metallic thread all the way across, and those are topped with these little coppery lined beads. And I just really love this seam. It's simple and elegant, and the metallic thread just kind of makes it pop. And then we started with some that had some silk ribbon embroidery in it. These again are detached herringbones. I added a silk ribbon lazy daisies here. When I sewed it together, we lost almost every one of those. And then the blossoms are also silk ribbon lazy daisies with a 4mm ribbon. And then we have another double seam. This one is a continuous herringbone, but it has a large one followed by a small one. And that allows for some interesting variations. And that's something I need to play with more. I've got my double beads again, and then I have lazy daisy flowers with a bead in the center and some ribbon stitch leaves. This one was where I probably put more beads on than I should have. I think this is when this corner started to get really weighty, but I really like the look of it, so I'm not going to complain too much. But this one is herringbones. I think they're actually done with 2 colors of thread. I think I used an orange thread going across. I don't remember now. And then I think I used this variegated green going the other way. So 2 bugle beads on this side with some little brass beads, and then 3 on that side with the little green bead. So I like the look of that one, but again, it added a little more weight to this whole thing than I was expecting. So now we're into the second half of this. The last seam and this one are picking up where I really was showing what I was doing in these videos. So this one is a double herringbone. So there's 1 row of continuous and then 1 row of detached, partially finished ones. And then they've got some cross hatching in them, the ribbon stitch leaves. And then I used this square bead and sort of a rhinestone bead and a tiny seed bead at the end. And I love that seam as well with the little ruched roses. And so I either start them with a colonial knot or a French knot before I weave down the ribbon. But I always love those flowers. I use them on a lot of things. This one was also a new to me herringbone, and it's got little caps on the herringbone. So you do the herringbone stitch, you come back, do a cap, and then go back and make the next part of the stitch. So it's got that little added back stitch, and then just these little, I always call these sort of trefoil elements because there's 3 lines, and then I put a bead at the end. And that's a nice seam. I like that one. I also added this little tiny seam. And this is another thing that I probably could have gone back and changed. It should have gotten moved down just a little bit, but I planted it right in the center-ish of that seam, and it should have been a little lower, but I didn't want to tear it out. So it's got a detached herringbone, some straight stitches, the cross hatching, and then lazy daisy leaves, and then this is a double lazy daisy and metallic thread for the flower. And then this is a more recent seam, so the herringbone in the gold pearl cotton cross-hatched with the bright green and the little stone beads. This one in the center here, that's also a new to me herringbone. It's a square pattern, so made in very much the same way because you're crossing over the different things. And then I put these flower beads in the center and some lazy daisies off to the side. This seam is along the same lines, except that it's a continuous form of this one. So done very similarly, just having a longer cross hatch over each way, and then those little trefoil elements in between. And this one is another one where it's got the 2 different sizes and heights of herringbone in a continuous line and the flowers. So very similar to this line here, so you can see how the elements are same. The flowers are even in the same spot. The only difference is this one doesn't have the leaves and the beads are in the different spots. And then we come to these last few stitches that we've done in the last 2 episodes. So a continuous herringbone with a fly stitch and a bead. That was a quick and easy one to do. I enjoyed that one. And then there's this one that we did last time, which is a continuous herringbone in pearl cotton, cross-hatched with a metallic thread, and then with a green straight stitch over the top and some little brass beads. And I like the way that one came out as well. And then the other 2 seams, these are both continuous herringbone. This one is stacked one against the other, and some gold beads in the center. And then this little floral seam with a continuous larger cross herringbone, some colonial knot flowers, and lazy daisies. So now you've had a look at all the stitching on the autumn bell pull. I put it out on my little entry dresser where I keep a brass tray that I keep my keys in and stuff. So for fall, I put it on that. Mushu seems to like it. He's been sitting on it quite a lot. So I hope you've enjoyed following along with that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on finishing it. I'd also love to know, would you have done something different along this outer edge, or would you have just done the plain seam like I did? I'm really trying hard not to go buy things. I've been trying so hard to clear things out. And I don't want to go buy another piece of lace just for this project. This is just a quick video finishing this project off, and the next video we're going to get started on that autumn bell pull. I've already been filming on that, and I can't wait to show you. Have a beautiful day. Happy stitching. I'll see you in the next video.